The world is increasingly complex and interconnected. International agreement and collective action are needed more than ever before.
Global governance sounds like a really big topic, and it really is. It's where we try to bring the world together to solve the big problems of our time.
Good day, this is the Group 5 and we are here to discuss the contemporary global governance with integration of COVID-19. Our objectives in our reporting is to widen the abstract thoughts of our listeners and be able to state the important role of the global governance in the contemporary world, compare the differences within the variables, as well as relate and apply it to their everyday living by the end of our presentation. So, let's get on to the topic. So what is the global governance? So the global governance is the purposeful order that emerges from institutions, processes, norms, formal arrangements, and informal mechanisms that regulate action for the common good. So the global governance as a term refers to a way in which the global affairs are being managed. The most important reason why the global governance exists is that there is no single nation in our world that has got all the resources needed to deal with the problems afflicting humanity in our planet. So these problems includes poverty, malnutrition, climate change, disease, disaster risk, organized crime, terrorism, and etc. The most viral problem and challenge the global governance is facing today on the 21st century is the infamous COVID-19 pandemic, which affects the whole world. This worldwide pandemic has an active cases of 219 million and killed about 4.55 million people in the world, including our country, Philippines. The global governance is doing its best to defeat the virus involved in this pandemic. That is why its institutions are on its full operation to heal our world as quickly as possible. So what are these institutions of the global governance? So the three institutions of the global governance are the United Nations or UN, International Criminal Court or ICC, and World Bank. So let's get to know what is the meaning and purpose of the United Nations. So the United Nations is an intergovernmental organization or an international government within our world, aiming to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, achieve international cooperation, and be the center for harmonizing the actions of our nations. The United Nations was founded in 1945, shortly after the Second World War. The Second World War proved to be a devastating tragedy for all countries involved. The UN was formed with the purpose that if further conflict arises between nations, a solution could be debated upon without the need for war. It maintains worldwide peace and fosters, sometimes tries to forge relationships between countries. It is interesting to note that before the formation of the UN, there was an organization called League of Nations. This was formed at the end of World War I in 1919 by the Treaty of Versailles or the Peace Treaty of World War I. It had similar goals and objectives, but since it could not prevent the World War II, it was deemed as a failure. The further continuation of the topic of the United Nations will be discussed by Ubatay.
United Nations. It is intergovernmental organization. What are the purpose of the United Nations are? The first one is to maintain international peace and security, and to that, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal threats to the peace, and for the suppressive of aggression or others' breach of the peace, and to bring about by special means and conformity with the principles of justice and international law. Adjustment or settlement of international disputes or station which might limit to breach of peace. And the second one is to develop relations among the nation based on respect for principles of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take the appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. The third one is to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems. Of that, economic and social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and promoting and encouraging respect for human rights, for fundamental freedom for all without distinction of race, sex, language, or religion. The fourth one, to promote and encourage respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all distraction to race, sex, language, or religion. And the last one is to center for living or center of harmonizing the action of nation in achieving these ends. The responses to COVID-19 pandemic. The UN Secretary General has launched the UN Comprehensive Response to COVID-19 to save lives, protect societies, recover better. The COVID-19 pandemic is more than a health crisis. It is an economic crisis and humanitarian crisis, and also a security crisis and human rights crisis. This crisis is highlighted severe fragilities and inequalities within and among nations. Coming out of this crisis will require a whole society, whole government, and the whole world to approach driven compassion and solidarity.
So good day to you, sir, and everyone. I'm Cadet Castones Jules Jr. and I'm going to talk about the response plan to COVID-19. So this is just a continuation of the UN response to COVID-19. So, first slide. So, to address immediate health needs, the plan was produced by WHO or World Health Organization and partners and sets out the priorities for the global health response. It outlines the public health and measures all countries need to implement. So to prepare for and to respond to COVID-19 is being financed through government budgets, the UN Emergency Response Fund, and WHO's Solidarity Response Fund, which is open to corporation and individuals. So we're going to proceed to ease impact in the 50 most vulnerable countries. So the plan set out the priorities for COVID-19 response in vulnerable and poor countries. So it is primarily vehicle for raising resources for the immediate COVID-19 related health and multi-sectoral needs in more than 50 countries. Next, to deliver rapid recovery. So the United Nations framework guides the actions of a UN or United Nations system to the next 12 to 8 months to help social economic recovery in middle and lower income countries. So next is let's proceed to the International Criminal Court. So this court investigate where warranted and tries individual charged with gravest crimes of concerns to the international community. Uh, so the crime of genocide and crimes against humanity and war crimes and the crime of aggression. So the AC is a permanent international court established to investigate, prosecute, and try individuals accused of committing the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. So we're going to proceed. Next slide. So International Court in relation to COVID-19 pandemic. So when COVID-19 outbreak was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, worldwide restrictive measures were being introduced by International Criminal Court in order to contain the spread of virus, culminating in partial or complete lockdowns. So this lockdowns assure us to safety for our health. So the next slide is the World Bank International. So World Bank, it is an international financial institution that provides loans and grants to government of low and middle income countries for the purpose of pursuing capital projects. So the World Bank promotes long-term economic development and poverty reduction by providing technical and financial support to help countries and reform certain sectors or implement specific projects, so such as building schools and health centers, providing water, electricity, fighting disease, and protecting the environment. So I think this is all for today, and thank you for listening, and have a good day. God bless.
Good day, everyone. Especially to you, sir. I am Cadet Noel Saguban. World Bank response to COVID-19 pandemic has taken broad, fast action to reduce the spread. COVID-19 deploying health response operation moving forward over 65 countries. How does globalization affect government during the integration of COVID-19 pandemic? Well, in this time of pandemic, globalization may have a great impact in the government. As we all know, that it altered the way we live and earned livelihood, and with that, we cannot deny the fact that the globalization can help the government to make our economy work on progress. But because of COVID-19, it may bring a lot of problems. That's why the government has implemented a lot of policy in order to lessen or avoid its transmission in our country. Apparently, they implemented a certain lockdown uh, to some part of the Philippines, and it may result of having an empty streets. And for me, this is somewhat good because through this one, we can assure uh, that we may be able to prevent being infected. Then the next one, public gatherings are banned, and there are some somewhat travel restriction, and it felt so sad knowing that we are not truly prepared in facing this kind of situation, as it uh, as it authentically affects not just the gathering itself, but also to those who want to go somewhere, somewhere, or even the source of income of others, like selling or buying goods across the country. Because I know that all of these are prohibited. Then they imposed physical distancing. Uh, Although it is quite new because we are not used to this, but it is somewhat relevant to us. Actually, in the very beginning, it is okay to implement lockdown or something, but as the time goes by, it turns out to be a nightmare to me because there are lots of people died, and the government assistance are not enough to cater or address this kind of problems. Probably, my studies are getting affected uh, as we are now in a new normal setup. I think that all throughout its pros, there will always be a sort of cons, like uh, stores are forced to lock down, and we need to accept the fact that the stores may have great impact in terms of health, not just in our country, but also our community, but also to our economy. Therefore, I am hoping that this pandemic may come to an end, and may the government address the problems that are still exist now. Uh, Next, internationalism versus globalism. Internationalism. So, internationalism principle of cooperation among nations for the promotion of their common good or devotion to the interest of particular nation. People of all nations have more in common than they do differences. Globalism. Globalism is the operation or planning of economic and foreign policy on a global basis. The development of social, cultural, technical, uh, or economic network that transcend national boundaries. And that's all. And thank you.
Globalism. It refers to various systems with scope beyond the merely international. It is an ideology based on the belief that people, goods, and information thought to be able to cross international waters and borders. Ideology that advocates the concept of globalization. It tends to advocate for such policies as increase in immigration, interventionism, and global governance. Next is difference between globalism and internationalism. In this topic, I will give an example of internationalism and globalism to see the difference. Example of internationalism: trading goods and service. Example, the United States buying some product to the Philippines, while globalism is the process for the internationalism to be done through all the people connected to one another in transaction to another nation. Next is global governance in 21st century. Most careful observers of our contemporary global landscape would have no difficulty accepting the claim that we have entered a period of inhuman evolution, characterized by the acceleration and the velocity of our history and the uncertainty of our trajectory. Next is challenge, the environmental challenge. As we know, there are so many social environmental issues like air emissions and air quality, energy use, and conservation, and many more. We humans are responsible for these issues. For example, global warming. Because of these activities, such as burning fossil fuels and deforestation and tree clearing, these activities is increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and it starts a climate change. As we know, climate change is not good in our environment. In short, environmental challenge is an issue of our environment. Next is social challenges. Social challenges is the failure of present economic system to distribute its increasing wealth more qualitatively, has to growing inequality and the consequent social instability. Next is today's social problem. Many of today's social problems are the consequence of the globalization and of finance and commerce. Against the background of a refusal to accept social globalization, the free movement of people, as well as the global implementation of civil and human rights, among other things, in order to ensure human governance. I give some example of social problem, and these are: increase the disparity between the developed and developing nation. Those increase the gap between the rich and the poor. Rich and wealthy people are able to increase more control over the nation resources through the application of science and technology. Globalization requires skilled laborers. There are a chance of unemployed unskilled laborers, and less developed nation becomes dependent on developed nation. That's all.
Good day, sir. I'm Cadet Condrion, and I'm going to report about the challenges of the global governance in 21st century. So, first challenge is the social challenges of globalization. So, social challenges: the failure of the present economic system to distribute its increasing wealth more equitably as to growing inequality and the consequent social instability. So many of today's social problems are the consequences of the globalization of finance and commerce. So against the background of a refusal to accept social globalization, the free movement of people, as well as global implementation of civil and human rights. So among other things, in order to ensure a humane global governance. So that's about the social challenges. So next is the economic challenges. So these powerful demonstrations affect our work. So in our globalized world, everyone can now see how wealthy live. So the spread of instant communication and the internet has led billions of people like China, India, Latin America, and other parts of developing world to aspire the lifestyle and patterns of consumption similar to those prevailing in advanced economies. So furthermore, these populations are often unwilling to postpone such aspirations and increasingly expect their governments to deliver rising levels of prosperity. So pushing for more equitable distribution of world resources. So these the economic challenges. So next is the security challenge. So from the word security, so close international interdependence and the emergence of integrated global economy. So the growing sophistication and destructive power of weapon systems. So from the word security, so this involves weapons. These are including the nuclear weapons. So we all know every country in regards of security, they have nuclear weapons. So we know that how dangerous nuclear weapons are. So have drastically expanded the scale of losses in human lives. So and property associated with the kinds of conflict on which on two occasions were witnessed in the 20th century. So the next topic is relevance of the state amid globalization. The role of the nation state in a global world is largely a regulatory one as the chief factor in global interdependence. So while the domestic role of the nation state remains largely unchanged, states that were previously isolated are now forced to engage with one another to set international commerce policies. So globalization is about the interconnectedness of people and business across the world that eventually leads to global cultural, political, and economic integration. It is the ability to move and communicate with others all over the world in order to conduct business internationally. So, definition of state. So, is a community formed by people and exercising permanent power within a specified territory. So, based on international law, a state is typically defined as being based on 1933 Montevideo Convention. So, what is the 1933 Montevideo Convention? So, this a state as a person of international law should possess the following qualifications. So there are 4 qualifications of the 1933 Montevideo State Convention. So the convention stipulated that all states were equal sovereign units consisting of these the 4 qualifications. So a permanent population, second, defined as territorial boundaries, third is government, and fourth is an ability to enter into agreements with other states. So these are the 4 1933 Montevideo Convention: the permanent population, defined territory, government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states. So that's all for my report, sir. So I am Cadet Condrillion. So the next reporter will be Cadet De Los Santos, who will continue the remaining slides.
Elements of state: people, territory, government, sovereignty. People, the most important element of state. It is simple because there is no state without its people. The size of the population within the state cannot be fixed, but of course, the greater the population, the greater the manpower. Territory: the fact that when territory is threatened or invaded by an aggressor, it does not preclude or destroy the existence of its statehood. Sovereignty. In political theory, sovereignty is a substantive term designated supreme legitimate authority over some polity. In international law, sovereignty is exercise of power by state. Sovereignty is important because it is the right of the people to elect their government, its laws, etc. What if there is no sovereignty? There is every possibility of forces of lawlessness sweeping away the whole city. It is the only sovereign who can keep all the sections of the society in order and proper places. Can we exist without sovereignty? According to the declarative theory of statehood, a sovereign state can exist without being recognized by other sovereign states. Unrecognized states will often find it difficult to exercise full treaty-making powers or engage in diplomatic relations with other states. What is state if it is not sovereign? Some nations are sovereign states, but many are not. Nations that hold territory but are not sovereign states. The government. A government is an institution through which leaders exercise power to make and enforce laws. Government basic functions are providing leadership, maintaining order, public providing services, providing national securities, providing economic securities, and providing economic assistance. The government is responsible for the maintenance of the law and order and the provision of common services like defense, issues of currencies, transportations, and other essential services performed to its people, such as the authority of the state is exercised by the government. Functions of the state are performed by the government. Law of the state is made by the government. Nation. The word nation can also refer to a group of people who share history, traditions, culture, and language even if the group does not have a country of its own. Nation is stable of a group of people connected by languages, territories, economic ties, and sharing common characteristics. A nation is a territory where all the people are led by the same government. Difference between government and states. In order, in order not to get confused from government and state, their difference is that a state can be distinguished from a government. A state is the organization, while a government is the particular group of people. The administrative bureaucracy that controls the state apparatus at a given time. That is, governments are the same means through which state people is employed. Difference between nation and states. We might get confused with the state and the nation. So, in order to understand well, I try to differentiate the two. For example, if we talk about the Philippines, our country is a state. As a state, we might be referring to the Philippine government, the Philippine waters, land, and airspace territory, and its internal and external sovereignty. While the nation, on the other hand, if we talk about the Philippines as a nation, we are referring to the shared collective nation of democracy, our history, and our collective identity. In other words, the state is a political concept, while the nation is the cultural concept. So that's all for our report prepared by Group 5. Thank you for listening.